From the memorable formulation of Alfred North Whitehead, a specific statement on an old contestation, namely that between the political actors and um, the intellectual actors. The great conquerors. Oh, this is from one of Whitehead's lectures. The great conquerors, from Alexander to Caesar and from Caesar to Napoleon, influenced profoundly the lives of subsequent generations, but the total effect of this influence shrinks in significance if compared to the entire transformation of human habits and human mentality by the long line of men of thought from Thales to the present day, men individually powerless, but ultimately the rulers of the world. Um, so I just wanted to signal that old contestation, which was already named by Socrates and Plato, this question who really is at the center of things, the political man or the rational man, Homo sapien. Um, this question, of course, under critical thought could be exploded, and then you say, why Homo sapien, or why the aristocrat of nature, or why the political contest. You could define the human being according to sapien, the trait of being a sapien, seeking knowledge or science, but you could, or wisdom, knowledge, science, wisdom, um, or you could define human being in n number of other ways. Um, I think somehow the Predators films, that those beings have defined themselves in a totally different way than beings that claim to be seeking infinitely perfect knowledge. Um, so let's look at the light of Arnold Brecht's account of the historical conditions, and specifically what he designates as sociological conditions under which the current dominant thinking in a large part of the globe on basically, let's say, remembering Leo Strauss has said Nietzsche has been sanitized by Simmel. So Simmel came up with really the strongest statement of the difference between science as fact and everything else as value. So everything else would include the good, the true, the beautiful, and all the ideas, basically, that the higher ideas that Plato is dealing with. So, but in any case, what Arnold Brecht is talking about is the Prussian universities in the second half of the 19th century. So he remarks that although sociological studies, demography, and all kinds of looks at the habits of people, the dwelling of people, the morals of people, um, on an aggregate scale, uh, and in a way that differs from the manner of the anthropologists, had been going on in America and in England in an empirical manner for a long while, but it was totally the thinking on it, the theoretical thinking on it, was totally controlled by the Prussians, who actually were somewhat late comers to incorporating sociology into their universities, which were at the best at that time. I think 8 out of 10 of the best universities in the world. The other ones being so the other ones being English. So the English at their Cambridge, Oxford, were doing sociology too, but without a theoretical basis for it. So the way sociology became the banner bearer for the new thinking, for the fact value distinction, for basically the view that science and knowledge are the same, and wisdom is something that's excluded from that and tagged under value. That we're dealing with the so-called wertfrei Wissenschaft, or the value-free science, which means experimental science, that which can be repeated under the theory of the uniformity of nature. So, from the political angle, it's interesting that what Rush talks about is in the struggle between the uh, liberals, being the liberal Protestant professors, basically, professors of their culture program, and the Junker class, who had abandoned the belief in religion proper, but who wanted to conserve it as something which was salutary in its own way, and which the Junker class, Bismarck, of course, I mean, we have, if you want more on this attitude of the Junker class, Bismarck's autobiography is the source. But who really, even though the law had ceased to enshrine Christianity as the state religion, they nonetheless wanted to retain it, and especially against possible incursion of rule by, extramontane rule from the Pope in Rome. They didn't want Catholicism to get too much power, as it did during the Culture Comp period, which was, I think, lasted almost 20 years. But moreover, the real concealed enemy were the liberal Protestants, who basically wanted to establish something like a separation of church and state, and basically get rid of any remnant of positive Christianity. So, under those conditions, which Brecht says the Junker class is something like, what's his phrase here? Semi-authoritarian monarchic government. So, the people that were for that, as I've read also from other sources, um, that quite a few of the professors at that time openly announced their allegiance to the House of Hohenzollern and to um, Prussian conservative Protestantism. So that when they produced histories, they produced histories in the service of the state. So, what the dynamic that happened is that the liberals who didn't like um, the state rule would then accuse the professors of putting their own personal opinions in, and they would constantly batter them with demands for be scientific. Is this scientific? Is this an opinion, or is it scientific? And so this led to the dynamic which we still see today, where a kind of nihilism, of a certain sort of nihilism, which isn't actually nihilism, but it's the simul settlement on Nietzsche, so that there is belief in experimental science as knowledge, real knowledge, but this must be experiment and not claims to personal experience. So when you get that wertfrei Wissenschaft, it amounts to the same thing as the exclusion of all normal experience, which would then be put down as anecdote. So this is one of the sources in which, now I want to ask the question, is it that science then, in also, however else it may be at a deeper level of Dasein, at the political level, comes to be like a religion, because it's the only thing that's recognized as knowledge. And in the democracy, you're supposed to inform yourself as to what is the real knowledge, so you can, vote in a sensible way. So to this extent, I think Heidegger takes a view that this is on a level that's just a political level, which Heidegger wouldn't even go into. But at the political, I think Heidegger takes this view that science is a religion.